So good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to this beautiful, lovely, safe space of ours, which is ELSAConnect. And as all of us here know, this is our endeavor to bring together everybody during this terrible pandemic that we are going through. We've not been able to meet for so long, but this platform is what has kept us together, has kept us connected with each other, and this is where this has given us the wind beneath our wings. It has kept us going totally. This is the safe space where all the ELSAs come together and we discuss everything under the sun, all about our life, and keeps us going and the sisterhood becoming stronger. And today we have with us, today's session is a conversation between two friends, Geeta Verghese and Vimla Sikand, who we lovingly know as Elizabeth Mathai, or Liz, and they will take us down a walk, the memory lane. And these two women, as they have been an integral part of India's banking backbone, the SBI. They've seen it through the changing times and have made their mark in what was largely a male-dominated space. So now, without further ado, I will hand it over to Liz, who will take us through the conversation. Liz, it's all yours.
Well, yes, I'm Elizabeth Mathai, née Vimla Sikand, and I'm known as Liz Sikand also, well, a variety of names. And I would request Geeta here to take us through the history. It's a very rich, very, very interesting history that we have gone through. So, Geeta, would you like to take over?
Yes, thank you, Liz. Liz and I, when we were talking about it, we thought that, to understand the ethos, work culture of the bank, a little bit about overview about the history of the bank would be a nice way to begin this session. So Liz and I, we joined the bank on 1st July 1972. This was an important day for the bank also because the first reorganization of the State Bank of India happened on that date. It was implemented, and the branch manager, who was earlier known as the agent of the branch, thereafter, after 1st July 1972, he was called the branch manager. And the secretary and treasurer who headed the circle was thereafter called the chief general manager. And these titles of the secretary and treasurer, agent, these go back to the Presidency Bank days, And if you look at the history of the bank, it is almost like the economic history of modern banking in India. And the bank, I just thought, I would just touch on some aspects of the history, because if you think back, when Tipu Sultan was defeated in 1799, the East India Company suddenly found itself in charge of almost the whole subcontinent, which was in its domain. And they wanted a way in which to administer this new domain of theirs, and also to get revenue collection, and their main primary objective of trading, to export things from India. So keeping all these things in mind, the East India Company thought of starting a joint stock bank. And there were three administrative units which were called the presidencies: the Bengal Presidency, the Madras Presidency, and the Bombay Presidency. Now, the Bombay and Madras presidencies were headed by governors, but the Governor General was there in Bengal. His headquarters was in Calcutta. And so the joint stock bank that they wanted to set up to facilitate revenue collection and trade also was the Bank of Calcutta, which was set up in 1806. The Bank of Calcutta in 1809 became the Bank of Bengal, the first of the presidency banks, to be followed by the Bank of Bombay and the Bank of Madras. Now, what is fascinating is how these banks did business in an alien country. Those Englishmen and Scotsmen were not familiar with our culture, with our language, with any of the aspects of this country. And they were segregated, the white man and the natives and that sort of thing. So the way they made the structure of the bank was, there was the agent who was the head of the branch, there was the accountant, and they got hold of a very prominent local business to become the khazanchi of the bank, the head cashier, in charge of the cash. And he was given the money in the morning, and in the evening he had to account for all the transactions and hand it back to the accountant. And this khazanchi, the responsibilities he had was, he had to get market reports on all the borrowers. He had to discount bills of exchange, and the sort of business that the bank was involved, these presidency banks, in trading. They, in the early years, the main commodities traded were opium and indigo. Opium they were exporting to China, as you know, to Hong Kong and China. And indigo was also a commodity that they wanted our farmers to cultivate. So given this, there was a lot of bills of exchange which had to be discounted. In India, we had trading, finance for trade from centuries. We have had ties with the Roman Empire also. So there were many local practices, money lenders who had their own way of functioning. And these foreigners coming, they had to adapt to local conditions. So the branches of the presidency banks were opened initially in port towns. And because communication was bad, the agent was more or less an autonomous functionary. He had to make sure that his branch was a profit center. So whatever was needed, advice of the khazanchi, local practices, they used all that to run their business. And that itself is, and of course there was a lot of difference in the wage structure between the agent and the accountant, who were Europeans, with the Indian native employees of the bank. So after the presidency banks continued right up to 1921, when the three presidency banks were merged to form the Imperial Bank of India. Now, both the presidency banks and the Imperial Bank of India were combining the role of commercial banks and Central Bank of India, because there was no Reserve Bank of India. And the presidency banks initially issued bills of exchange, which were legal tender in the dominion of the British East India Company. So in 1921, the Imperial Bank of India was formed. These are the pictures of the three, presidency banks. And in 1921, this is the logo of the Imperial Bank of India. The empire, the sun never sets on the British Empire. So all that is there in this thing. But it was a completely private bank. The shareholders were all private people, no government stake at all in the Imperial Bank of India. And when the presidency banks were merged, there were 70 branches across the network of these banks. And the mandate given to Imperial Bank was that they had to open within 5 years 100 more branches. Now, at the height of its, the British Empire stretched from Pakistan to Burma to Ceylon. So the Imperial Bank of India branches were there in Rangoon, Quetta, Colombo, Karachi. So can you imagine the footprint of this bank, Imperial Bank of India? And these 100 branches, when they opened it, they had to take in Indians as probationary assistants. I'll just come back to that, continue this thread. In 1934, the Reserve Bank of India was formed. And the Reserve Bank of India took on the functions of the central bank, and Imperial Bank became a purely commercial bank thereafter. And the SBI, after independence, it was decided that we needed a vehicle for the nation's development. And for that purpose, the government nationalized this private bank, which was Imperial Bank of India, and made it this under the State Bank of India Act. It became a nationalized bank. The princely states, erstwhile princely states, also had very important regional banks. These were in Mysore, Travancore, Hyderabad, Patiala. So they wanted to bring these also in the ambit of the State Bank Group. And so the Subsidiary Banks Act happened in 1959. And the first chairman of State Bank of India was Sir John Mathai. He was formerly a finance minister of India, also the railway minister, and the uncle of Dr. Verghese of Amul fame, So the weightage given by the government to State Bank of India was so important that a former finance minister became the chairman of the bank. And this has been part of the DNA of the bank, to be in the forefront wherever anything the nation needed. I remember when the Kargil war was happening, we got stories that when the civilians were evacuated from there, it was only the army and the State Bank of India staff who remained there because the State Bank had to make treasury payments. And later, when the insurgency happened in the valley, there also under armed guard, the State Bank of India branches were open and made to function to make all these transactions that the government required. So this is still very much a part of the DNA of the bank, And to go back to the Imperial Bank of India, the staffing pattern, the probationary assistants who were Indians started joining after the Imperial Bank was formed in 1921. And limited number of them were recruited, but when the depression happened, under the guise of austerity, the management decided they would stop the recruitment of probationary assistants. And the depression was followed by the World War. So again, they said that they will not take Indians, but they were bringing people, expats from UK to become officers in the Imperial Bank of India. In 1943, there was Mr. J.R.D. Tata was a director on the local board of the Imperial Bank of India. And there is a letter that he wrote to the managing director, which I think is worth, knowing about. And I'll just read a few lines as extract from that letter written by Mr. J.R.D. If the Imperial Bank of India, whose shareholders, clients, and employees are predominantly Indian, is, as I believe it should be, considered an Indian bank, it is desirable that its control and management should be in Indian hands. The complete exclusion of Indians in the past from all high positions in the bank and the insistence on reservation in the future of 50% of the senior posts for Europeans can only be justified by the assumption that Indians are inferior in ability to Europeans, or if they have the ability, that they cannot be trusted. As an Indian, I cannot accept either of these assumptions, and unless, therefore, I felt that they no longer govern the policy of the board and of the management, it would be unfair to myself and to the other directors if I were to continue as a member of the board. And Mr. J.R.D. Tata resigned from the local board after the following year, So Indians were not recruited as officers till after independence. And nobody really knows about women coming in as probationary assistants. I tried to check up on that, but there are no records because the women who joined resigned very early, Within a couple of years, they just resigned and left. So there's no record. But in 1959, Mrs. Shanta Raghavan was the first lady officer who stayed the course, retired from the bank as a chief general manager. She passed away last month, So from 1959, women were, there were more women in the bank. And in 1972, for Listen My Batch, the chairman of the selection board was a very venerable old ICS officer called Mr. Raman. And he said that if women are as good as the men, then I will see that they are recruited by the bank. So that year, the bank didn't know what hit them, They just found that every circle had 3 or 4 women, coming into the thing. So Liz joined in Delhi circle and I joined in Madras circle. So Liz, why don't you tell them something about the culture then?
Yeah, I think in the South, they had a lot more ladies. In the North, there were very few and far between. 72 was different. 71, they had no lady probationers. 70, they had no lady probationers. 69, they had 1 lady probationer. And after she got posted out, she quit and went away. 72, there were seven of us. And it was a bumper crop of ladies, and most of us stayed, all of us stayed. We stayed till the very end, in fact. And after that, also 1 or 2 years, no lady probationers again. But I think in 72, when we came in such a large lot, the bank just didn't know what to do with us, how to handle the situation of ladies and the special needs that we had, And so in a way, it was not a very happy position for the bank. They were just caught unawares. But anyway, I'm in 72 with 7 of us, and then only leniency they showed to us was, okay, we sent you girls 2 by 2 to the branches, 2 of you, each of you into the branches. So my first branch was Simla, and there was another lady called Neelu. We were the first 2 lady probationers to walk into that branch. And I have such fond memories of that. It was beautiful, beautiful. You can see it. The outside was extremely beautiful, as you can see. It's a heritage building, and they can't touch the outside now. Inside is completely changed. But the inside was so beautiful, so beautiful. Very English, very Angrez, actually. All wood, dark, nice wood, and high counters, extremely high counters, all of wood, and brass railings polished. And behind that was the high chairs, very tall chairs to go up to the counter. Neelu and I were just 5 foot nothing, and both would jump like monkeys onto those chairs and manage to sit there. And you had to sit very straight and very, you couldn't shift around because the chairs would swing like anything. But it was a delightful branch. Only, what should I say, bad, kind of a mark against that branch was there was no ladies' toilet. Gunjan Saxena would have been horrified. So everybody had to use the same so-called toilet, which is a hole in the wall. And all they put was, as a courtesy, not to us, anybody, they hung a jute curtain across the toilet, and that was it. So I would go to Neelu, I need to go, come. Then she'd come with me. When she wanted to go to the loo, I'd say, she'd come to me and I'd say, she'd tell me, come on, I need to go. So then we'd go. That's how the position was, where this is what I said, that basic amenities, the bank had not anticipated ladies coming in. To be fair to them, as I said, you can't blame them. Then after Simla was a horrific experience. I was confirmed, and I went to a small little village branch. My husband was in the Air Force, by the way. So he was posted to Adampur. And Adampur lies in the Doaba. And the nearest branch was a little village branch, shack, called Kurtpur. So I was sent there. This is about 10-minute ride from the Air Force station. When I walked in, first lady to be ever seen in that area at all. Can you imagine? Heart of Punjab, a woman walking in there as an officer. And when I went in, I needed to go and use the loo. So I asked, there was one lady, fortunately, one lady clerk. So I asked, where's the loo? I want to go. She says, madam, there is no loo. I said, what? I said, no loo. So one staff member was standing nearby. He says, madam, kya hua ji? So it is explained. Said, madam, kya problem hai? Kheti khet hai na wahan par. Uday bhi jao. You are welcome. I was really, I was horrified. I was shocked. Yeah, me, a big town girl from Delhi and a proud graduate of Lady Shri Ram College going to the fields. It is unimaginable. So I was really put out. But then the girl said, never mind, there's a next door, there's a lady. We can use her house, and she allows us to use her house. So we can go there and use it. And well, we used that. It was just one big room with a door. Okay, fine, that was at least there. And I did that for 2 years. That's the kind of conditions. That was in late 70s. That was the kind of condition we had. Geeta, I think you have a story also to tell us.
Yeah, well, I was posted to HAL branch, and HAL thought fit to give us a old building in one part of their, campus. And the ladies' toilet was under the staircase. So every time people would go up and down, the dust would be falling on your head, So we had to also put up with these sort of, no place to have lunch. You have to sit at your desk and have lunch. But anyway, those were initial years, and things have changed a lot now. Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
Yeah. And the preconceived notions that people had about ladies in the bank, oh dear me. I mean, one part of the country, I was considered, a fallen woman. I mean, bad models. Me sitting down with the men and chit-chatting. Oh my goodness me, how dreadful. How can you do that kind of thing? And another part of the country, it was poor girl. Her parents can't afford a dowry. So she has to work to kind of make up for that and make her dowry. I mean, totally different views, of course, but you joined the bank for a purpose, not for ourselves. It had to be for a reason. I mean, that is how it was. And and when I went to Amritsar branch, I went for training. We were trained in various branches, and Delhi Circle had a number of states, and we had to move from state to state. First one was, as I told you, Simla. Second branch was Amritsar. Heart of Delhi, heart of Punjab again, gosh. First lady to move in to the branch. And I really created quite a sensation. I didn't know about it. If I sneezed, the whole branch knew about it. But anyway, there was a thing called invigilation on Sunday, extra duties that were given to people. In the case of invigilation, there were some exams going on, so they would tell us to invigilate for those exams. So that was a Sunday. Nobody liked doing that. The branch manager called me and he said, Elizabeth, you are exempt from that duty. I said, oh. Then, yes, of course. I know how you ladies are. You like to wash your hair on Sundays and things. So you are exempt. I was quite happy. I came out. I had two other boys with me as fellow probationers. They asked me, what happened? What did he tell you? I said, that's what he told me. One of them was a Siddhar. So he said, what nonsense. I will take off my turban, unravel my hair, and I will go there and show myself to him. You tell me who has longer hair. But he had a point, actually. He really had a point. Sometimes you feel that men are also given a tough time, preference or whatever for women. And that was one instance. And then when I went to Ambala Cant on confirmation, lowly, I was just a lowly assistant accountant. And for some reason, the cash accountant had to suddenly go on leave. So they told me that you have to take over, emergency charge, a young little thing like me. So then I took over the keys, and it was one of those currency chest branches, huge. It was really big, lots of cash there, because there's so much of movement of the military there. I mean, there's so large presence of military. So then one of the cashiers, looking at me, youngster, he turned around and said, मुझे ये दिन भी देखना पड़ रहा है कि चाबी एक औरत के हाथ में है, तिजोरी की चाबी एक औरत के हाथ में है. I mean, very dramatic. And the old man, the chief cashier, said, बेटा, तुम अभी जवान हो, बहुत कुछ देखना है आगे जाके. And he didn't mean it sarcastically. He was far nicer about it, in fact. So, that is something about the attitudes and the preconceived notions.
Liz, in the South, what happened was that people also had this feeling that women coming in actually are depriving a whole family of its income. If a man had got that job instead, a whole family would have been sustained. Here, these women are double income types. Both husband and wife are working. So that was an undercurrent of resentment that was there then. And suddenly the clerical staff, who never wanted transfers and things, they had gone into their 40s and early 50s maybe. And this chit of a girl coming as an accountant, and here in the home, they are the lord and master. They go home and the women are all around them. And here is this girl sitting. So there were a lot of these undercurrents of social attitudes which used to come in, and that used to make the workplace a little awkward for us, because people were not used to so many women in position. They were used to clerical women who would give priority to their home, responsibilities, but not to. And even the clerical women, I remember when I went to Delhi Circle on transfer after my marriage, one of the girls coming in, when I would give her some typing, and I go to the toilet and I find that she's sleeping on the toilet floor there. And when I asked her, what is the reason? Why are you not doing? She said, Madam, I have, been got up so early in the morning to cook food for the whole family and then come to work, because it's a joint family. And the other sisters-in-law, they think she's going to have fun in the office, getting away from the household chores. So she should, do her share of the housework and then come. So at all levels, women did have a lot of challenges in coming and taking up a job. It was never seen as, something that would come naturally to them. So go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, sure. In the South, in fact, I came across one of these similar occasions, like, men would be given off or come late because their wives would have periods. They'd come and, I never expected that. I never knew this. He came and told me that, Madam, I won't be able to come tomorrow. I said, why? Well, my wife is having period. I said, what? This just freely, this is not there in the North. You would never talk like that. So, the social kind of niceties were very different between the two sides, Oh, I must tell you a little gruesome story in Ambala Cant when I was there. Yes, and I was a PB manager, officiating personal banking manager, as they call it. And what happened was we used to give gold loans there, and the ornaments that were given as against the loans, we had to keep it in the chest, currency chest, or in a strong room, whatever. So that was in that very big currency chest that I was talking about. So I had gone in, I was putting in the gold, and I was closing the doors of the almara. Suddenly there was a big halagulla outside, and I don't know what, I was at the very end. They couldn't have seen me actually. And all of them just rushed out and pushed the door close, and that's it. And the light, the plug is outside the currency, the chest. I think that's no short circuiting and prevent that kind of thing. So when you take that out, no light, no ventilation. So they had pulled that out, and I was left in absolute darkness, absolute darkness. It is a huge chest as well. And a little sliver of light from up there, some skylight there, and absolutely no ventilation either. And that was horrific. And I just kind of felt my way to a chair, and I sat down. And I told myself, calm down, doesn't matter. They haven't brought in the cash. They haven't brought in the cash. They'll come back to put in the cash. Nothing is going to, I had to keep on telling myself that. It was quite frightening inside that. Well, quite frightening, yes. And I was carrying my second son at that time also. And then after some time, I heard the chaprasi bringing in that trunk outside, tin trunk. And I banged and yelled and screamed, and whatever little he could hear, he heard me. And he said, oh my God, Madam, Kishori mein band hai, currency chest mein band hai, Madam band hai, Madam band hai. So I'm running out, and this work, this cash, officiating cash accountant came running in, and they all pulled open the door. When I saw him, he was white as a sheet and shaking with fear. And he said, Madam, kya hua ji, Madam, please, pani pijiye, juice pijiye, doodh le aao. Oh, goodness me, all sorts of things. I said, doesn't matter. Nothing happened. It's all right. It's all right. So then he said, no, Madam. He was terrified if it went out. He said, Madam, please don't report this to head office. he would be in a lot of trouble, because the basic presumption is that you have to check before you close the doors. I mean, it had to be. And obviously, this was such a halagulan kind of thing that he didn't really remember that. So please, madam, I said, don't worry, I won't. Until date, I've never ever told. I mean, it's only here, and you people don't tell. So,
Liz, I think you must mention that a currency chest strong room is about 1.5 feet of solid steel. It is no explosive can also damage that. And once it's airtight, and the chest contains Reserve Bank of India's money, which is, old notes, moldy notes. So you can imagine an airtight thing. If Liz had been there for a couple of hours, it would have been really a different story.
Not even half an hour, 45 minutes was enough, because that
gas, it's airtight,
that comes out from the notes was disgusting. Until today, I have absolutely no respect for currency notes because of that. I say it's just a whole lot of moldy notes.
You had your fill of them in that 15 minutes.
So anyway, I got away with that. So it is okay. And one thing we felt which has really helped, I mean, it really hampered everybody for that matter, not just us. It was the unions. The unions, well, it's like a pendulum, unions. It's the influence of unions. The pendulum swings this way and then it swings that way. Earlier on with the British, it was swinging towards the officers. Then our time, it was swinging back to the unions. And they were so strong and so violent and very, very unpleasant indeed. And to the extent that they would decide we had this shuffling of seats in the branches. Every 6 months they had to be moved. And they would sit down and decide that this is it. And we had to kind of bargain. And you couldn't do anything. I mean, the head office made it very clear. Don't come to us. You create a situation, then don't come to us. You handle it. And you knew that you wouldn't get, it was very clear, you wouldn't get support if anything happened. And the worst thing was this contracted overtime. 20 hours had to be given, 120 hours of overtime, whether you like it or not. And that was an additional income for those people. It was unacceptable. And finally, I think it was with Madam Gandhi's emergency that stopped. And then slowly the backs of the unions were broken, and now it's practically non-existent now. Sad, because you've gone the other way again, which is not right. There is a healthy atmosphere when there is a union also to look after the interests of the workers. And one thing that you had to also decide, are you willing to take them on? I mean, are you willing to take on the flack that might happen if you make an issue? So, I mean, you suddenly find there's a clean cash book. You have to bring, at the end of the day, we have to bring it together and balance all the transactions of the branch. So while you're doing that, you'll suddenly find a whole lot of vouchers missing, or a whole lot of vouchers are torn up. But who can you say has done it? You know who's done. I mean, they have done it, but you don't know who's done it. And that was really a headache. To reconstruct everything would be, you could sit there for hours and they wouldn't be sitting with you anyway. I mean, it's kind of difficult those days. It was not easy. I believe me when I'm laughing and everything, all those instances were not easy, really not easy.
Liz, but when you report these things up to them, because even our bosses, the people at higher levels, they also had the general secretary of the union coming, and it was difficult for them. So thing across the bank, the terminology was deal with the situation tactfully. Which means don't bring the problem to us. Somehow you resolve it at your level and give. So deal with it tactfully is a term we could understand across the bank in those days, I remember when I was faculty at State Bank Staff College, I was conducting this program for women branch managers. And in one session, people were recounting about events, which had be notable in their term as branch manager. So there was this young woman who was, that was the time at height of terrorism in Punjab. And this lady, she was posted to a very small branch in Punjab. And she said, she was a pakka Punjabi lady, you know, salwar kameez, tough type. And she told me that there was this person, boy, I think the terrorists there those days were in their early 20s. So one of them had, you know, one person boy came into her cabin. They were draped in a shawl, a big shawl, and he had his hands under the shawl. So looking at him, she knew that he was a terrorist. They were attacking branches a lot those days because they needed money, and they hold up of a branch meant they could get money. So she said, as soon as I looked at him, I knew that he was a terrorist and he had a gun with him. So I said, so what did you do? How did you deal with the situation? And her nonchalant reply was, I dealt with the situation tactfully. So I said, tactfully, and I've heard this word tactfully in very many contexts, but how do you deal with the terrorists tactfully? So she said she opened the drawer of her desk and she put her hand in and told him, whatever you have under your shawl, I have in the drawer. And he just looked at her, and I believe he walked out of her cabin, you know. So that is how the word tactfully was interpreted by very many people in very many ways, you know. So, so Liz, anything else that we want to add?
No, I think we've covered all the few instances, but I do say that the bank was, you know, so conscious of its social duties and social obligations. We've never let up on that, never. It was very important to us. Even that symbol that you see, the blue symbol, I believe is representative of the biggest bank, the blue, and the little keyhole, I think, is the smallest man. It means the biggest bank for the smallest man. And we were very conscious of that obligation of us. And there were a number of programs, a number of any kind of military measures that we would take. And one of them, you can hear it from Geeta, the kind of thing that she propagate, and she started the very idea of helping the needy and the less fortunate. Geeta, would you like to?
Yeah, you know, looking back, I think by the time, you know, I was nearing the end of my service and having worked in many offices across the country, I knew that this is one organization, you know, which the trust that the nation has on the State Bank of India is something that is across the country. You know, people trust that brand for whatever it is. They know that this is a branch that doesn't have any hidden costs and things like that. And if you say something is for nation's development, without any ulterior motive, you can, you know, implement that initiative, whether it is for priority lending and things. That's part of the ethos of the bank. So when I was posted in Gurgaon, State Bank of India, I felt, you know, that in our country, we do not have any platform which enables young people to work for some time on a development project, you know, like the US has Peace Corps or short-term fellowship programs. In our country, youngsters from the age of 12, they are made to prepare for IITs and you know, engineering courses and things, and then they get jobs and they get into you know, buying a house or something where the loans come, and then they have burnout in their 30s. And most of the computer engineers were saying that, look, is this what our life is about? So I felt that there was a need for giving them, like a, you know, punctuation mark in a sentence, some time to pause and think about what they want to do in their life. And if the State Bank could launch a fellowship program where urban people, youngsters, you know, in our day, our grandparents were in villages, and we used to at least go home to the rural areas for the holidays. But the youngsters today, the grandparents are also in cities. So they just don't know what's happening in rural India. So this State Bank of India, if it makes a fellowship program which enables youngsters from good universities to come and work for 13 months on a project, then perhaps this will help, them to later continue in the development sector, or even if they become IAS officers or CEOs, they could be touched by this experience that they've had. It will not be just theoretical knowledge. So I put up this proposal to the bank, and one thing about State Bank, it's so bureaucratic. To bring about change is very difficult. Nobody likes to go off the beaten track. So my note, when I put it up, it went through all the various levels, and then I found it had been filed away. So the decision was, said that no, we can't have, State Bank can't have this sort of a program. Then the chairman, Mr. O.P. Bhatt, at that time was a batchmate. And I wrote a DO letter to him and said that this is my proposal and I think the bank should launch this. And because it's such a trusted branch, it can become a success. So even though there was such a pull factor from the chairman, it still had to go through 13 levels. Everybody had to sort of give recommendation. And when people can't turn it down, what they do is they sit on it. So the paper remained with one MD for almost a month, but then being inside the bank, I could resort to guerrilla warfare, which meant that I would ask the secretary, where is this paper? Go and put it in front of your boss. And that way I was able to make sure that the paper note moved, and it finally reached Mr. Bhatt, and Mr. Bhatt saw to it that the board approved it. And by the time all approvals were in place, I had retired. And a month after I retired, I was made the coordinator of SBI Youth for India. And that program, initially, nobody knew, like in the State Bank, the book of instructions, you turn the page and you see what was done and you go. But this is something that nobody knew how to go about this. So that's the beauty of State Bank. When nobody knows what to do, they give you a free hand. And you have all the might and power of this bank behind you. The chairman is interested in the project and nobody is there to, pull you down and say, do it this way or that way. And so I had a free hand. In 1 year, we conceptualized, made the program, and we launched it. Now, I'm saying that this is going to be a wonderful program, but where am I going to get good candidates? And fortunately, at that time, in my Hyderabad stint, I had met Mr. Ratan Tata. So I wrote a letter to him. And for the first batch of Youth for India fellows, the Tata Group gave 7 candidates, who were paid full salary, and they came on a sabbatical and they worked with on our fellowship. So we had 27 in the first batch. I left the fellowship. I was there till 2016. Today, that program is the flagship program of the State Bank SBI Foundation. Despite COVID, they got 32,000 applicants and they have taken 108 of them. And these candidates, these fellows, they are working across 12 states of the country. And what I had envisaged was that youngsters from the south should go and work in rural areas of North India. East should go to the west, so that they, all these inhibitions of us and them should go. And it has worked out so well because they pick up the language so fast, and the sort of projects that have come from this fellowship. I thought in the beginning that women would not join this fellowship, but from the third batch onwards, more than half are women. And some of the projects that they have done is menstrual hygiene. In rural areas, women don't have any way in which they can even hang the menstrual cloth outside in the sun. It's all in dark, dingy places. So one of her other fellows, she made these reusable pads. In urban areas, we have disposable ones. We don't think of the environmental damage. Now, if all of rural India uses disposable pads, what would happen to the environment? So she designed this menstrual pads which are reusable, and the local women made it and used it for their local use. That was one project. There was another project in Tamil Nadu where a woman worked with salt pan workers. Those salt pan workers, they work without proper gear. Their feet are exposed to those salt pans and they are all calloused and there are no toilets for them. And these women, because of that, they don't drink water. So they are dehydrated, and it's terrible. And because they believe that if you have a urinal in the salt pan, it will contaminate the salt, there were no toilets. The men would at least go, as Liz said, out behind the tree, but the women couldn't, you know. So this girl designed a particular type of toilet which did not let the urine, you know, leak into the salt pans. That was her project. So the women went and understood the problems of women, you know, and they came out with projects like that. So every one of the fellows came back, you know, with something that they had done, which the NGO with whom they worked would not have, you know, otherwise thought of. We have about 12 partner NGOs as on date, you know, across the country. So this fellowship is something that I felt, you know, that maybe when you sit in a chair, you know, as soon as you retire, somebody else comes and sits and nobody knows the difference. But I left something behind for the bank, which is making a difference in the lives of these youngsters. Some of them say it's been transformational because they changed what their future plans were. Working in a project like this where they're touching lives, they felt was more meaningful than just making an MNC richer, you know, and that was something that they learned early on in life. So that's something that I felt was rewarding. So that's how it goes. So that's it. Liz, anything you want to add?
I could add a whole lot. There's every incident in the bank is an incident, but not really. I mean, we can carry on for some questions if need be.
Before
Can I ask you?
Yes, Binu, please go ahead.
Bimla.
Yeah.
I'm going to call you that, and there's no other name. Like you said, a rose is a rose is a rose. That's what she told me. So whatever name I call her, she still remains the rose. But what are your experiences? You were working when you were in Coimbatore when we met. You were with us.
Yeah, sure. Yes. I was in the bank then, but it was comparatively civilized, you know. I mean, but that's a branch where that gentleman came and asked me for leave because his wife had the periods, you know. Well, you live and learn, and it was accepted. I mean, yeah, but I mean, Coimbatore was really a nice city. Very enjoyable.
We had lots of fun together, I know.
Lots of fun, yeah. Round table, yes.
Yeah, that's true. Gosh. I was absolutely jolted out of coming from Delhi to a city like Coimbatore. I couldn't believe that this is what the social scene there would be.
Sometimes it's nicer in the smaller cities. Yeah.
I would like to invite NG here, please. Ma'am, you're here with us. Welcome. And she's here for her batchmates. Ma'am, please.
Gosh, there have always been trailblazers. It's so wonderful to hear all these anecdotes and also about how they negotiated the everyday, shall I say, challenges of the work environment, which was so gendered. And yet did it with so much calm and grace and equanimity. Similar challenges today for younger people would feel almost insurmountable. But there's something resilient with the two of them that they were able to. I remember meeting Geeta when the fellowship was in progress. She had come to Delhi to discuss it and so on. So when there was so much excitement writ large, like they were doing something, giving back to society in a big way. And that was, it was so palpable, that enthusiasm and energy and so on and so forth. And I can imagine Liz's expression when that man in Coimbatore came and asked for leave. I wondered, did you grant it, Liz? I was just wondering, did you grant the leave?
You had to. It was a done thing. I mean, you had to. You go with the flow. You go with the flow. Yes.
So I had a question, and this is to both of you. When you found men in your organization who were so, shall I say, patriarchal, how did you handle it? I mean, did you try and sort of convince them that there's another way of looking at life, at the workspace, at women colleagues, at the relationships, or you just sort of dealt with it on a daily basis and let it pass? Or did you did you sort of make an extra effort to say, catch them into your office and say, look, come here, I want to give you a talking to? I think you were both very gentle and probably thought
Yeah,
that was.
we were. It was.
No,
I mean,
the thing was that we could not, use any sort of, you couldn't throw the rule book at them. The unions were there to protect them. In fact, the unions would protect the ones who were not working. The self-motivated ones would be working for you, but the ones who were shirkers were being protected. So one could not confront them. You had to win their respect in some other way, You had to win it. And I feel that when you remove the hierarchy and you be one of them, and you show them that, you're willing to put your shoulder to the grind and work with them, then it becomes a better team, It ultimately is teamwork, and they have to recognize, and that is your job knowledge. All these sort of things are the things which were the ones you could depend on, not in any way using any other route, So that's how.
No, just to push this further a bit, there's so much talk now about sexual harassment at the workplace. This phrase itself is sort of a current coin in a way, just about a decade and a little over a decade old. But were there signs of this that startled you at that time, or is it something that you took as
no.
a
SBI
natural course?
never had that. SBI, I can vouch for it. I never had any feeling of any kind of sexual harassment. That word was just not there. I mean, or they were very frightened, I don't know. But they were quite protective also. It is not like that at all. I had no, I mean, what they did in their private, I mean, they might do it on their own lewd comments and things like maybe, but I didn't know. I didn't hear. I wouldn't say.
And one thing about the hierarchy is that if you felt that your boss was behaving in a certain way, you could go to his boss, and tell him that. And by and large, there was a very paternalistic attitude towards women. We were, entering the bank, so the senior people were very protective in a sense, In fact, that would work against us during our training. The branch manager will keep us in his cabin, not let us be outside. How will you learn the work if you sit in the branch manager's cabin? So they were overall, and they wouldn't send us to rural areas. We were kept in cities. The bank had this very paternalistic attitude. So that's something across the bank. I don't think now the way they define sexual harassment, even passing a lewd comment, I mean, nobody really defines sexual harassment in this detail those days. But by and large, there was nothing. We had to stay late into the night to balance the clean cash, and the men were there. But there were no incidents that were reported. Even in the staff college that I was there, where people came from everywhere, we didn't really have. And early years, of course, it was a very, very protective environment that the women were given.
Thank you. Preeti, you had a question?
Thank you, Geeta and Liz. It's like being back in LSR and doing money and banking and economics honors. It was really interesting to hear you. And I think I speak for many professional women today that we stand on the shoulders of women like you, in your early professional careers, kind of set the tone, I think, for a lot of what you said was very interesting to hear, how you handle men and the workplace and so on. I have a completely different question to ask you, which is actually about the non-performing assets in banks and, this huge burgeoning of bad debts in India today. What is your perspective on it? That bad debts are just, they're just ballooned in the Indian economy. So I'd just like to know from you what.
See, once we became a nationalized bank and the government started, getting earlier the chairman and all were people, like I said, finance minister was the chairman. Imperial Bank was completely privately held. Today, the government is the one which is dictating now loan waiver. I remember when I had a field officer, when I was branch manager of HAL branch in my second stint, he was handling the HAL account, which was running into crores. And he was also asked to give these, women's loan mela. Those days that Pujari was their loan melas. So the way he was writing off the loans in those accounts, I felt it was corrupting his attitude in the HL account, you know, that chalta hai attitude. In the Imperial Bank of India, they said that, you know, the books of accounts were so properly kept. So this dilution of norms. Hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Can you hear me? I don't know. I can't see the screen. That's why. You can hear me, no?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
we can.
So this was something, this dilution in the work culture with government, you know, coming in or somebody else interfering, that those were all negative things. And now with NPAs burgeoning, now you look at the other, you know, big accounts, big corporates also. It's all attitude which comes because of dilution of or keeping the bank insulated from outside pressure. That is where the thing started. I think post emergency and this mass lending, it started, and but then others also. The banks cannot be giving loans and not recovering. It's not a sustainable model, you know.
And actually, they say that mostly it's the smaller fish like Vijay Mallya who've been caught, and there are actually much bigger fish.
Absolutely.
35,000
Actually,
crores and
the big ones are the main bulk of the NPAs.
Absolutely. And they're the big names in India in business, actually.
Yeah, and we were made to. You had to, because the government just said that give loans, and then now nobody says anything. They don't open their mouths. Somebody else is being hung for it. You know.
Thank you so much, Geeta and Liz. That was really refreshingly candid. So nice to hear. Thanks.
Thank you.
Geeta and Liz, we have a comment on YouTube from Vatsala. She's saying, Geeta, thanks for the historical perspective of banking in India. It's most interesting. I'm really, really interested. So thank you for that.
There are many volumes which have been published for those interested, you know, very written by economists, which is a fascinating story of the economic history of the country. So those interested, and if you want to know more about Youth for India, there's a website. You can visit that at youthforindia.com.
Okay, great. So we can, I think, now officially bring this to a close, the official close. And thank you so much, Geeta and Liz. This was brilliant. And
would you like to get the next speaker?
Yes, absolutely. And while we thank you, we also invite Paramita. Is Paramita here to invite?
Paramita is not here, Tanya. I'll announce.
And I think MG wants to come in after that, Tanya. She's put her hand.
Okay, so on next Saturday, we have one of our very active members from ELSA Bangalore, Rama Shivkumar. Rama will be talking primarily about her journey of life and what she says how life has been her greatest teacher as she moves along. And so join us. Paramita will be the curator. So we join us at 4 o'clock on Saturday with Rama and Paramita.
Thank you.
Yeah, ma'am wants to come.
Yeah.
No, I just want to thank them. It's so great to bring back memories. Geeta and I were neighbors for many years, and we shared many happy moments and connections. This time when I was in Bangalore, her mother, you know, I had the privilege of meeting her mother again. She's 90, am I right, Geeta?
96.
She's 96. And she gave me a copy of a recipe book that she put together of recipes she herself made. And she's been a fabulous cook. I remember in our growing up years how we would be treated to her fabulous fish curries and, you know, recipes from the Syrian Christian community of Kerala, which is a very specific, very exquisite kind of cuisine. And again, it's lovely to connect with you, Geeta, and also to see Liz. I see Liz every time. Whenever there's a talk, I think she's one of the most regular attendees. But this time it was great to hear her speak, because she's very quiet. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here in your company. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Would Saroj and Indu would like to come in and just say something special about them, if you like. You're muted.
Geeta, I didn't know in college, only I met her afterwards because we were different fields of study. But Liz, of course, I always saw her in the corridor and she always looked absolutely charming with those huge dimples. So that's how I always remember her.
Yeah, whereas Liz and I were part of the same Paul Science group. So we were very, very close. Liz was our sixth person in our group. Remember, Liz?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I just couldn't call her Vimla. I mean, remember we met for the first time when we were signing in? And it was so lovely to meet up with you. Geeta, I met only recently, and it's been lovely. And if it wasn't for COVID, we four would meet quite often.
Yeah, we keep planning to meet, but it never happens.
Yeah.
Because of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, Liz, even I can't remember.
They're saying Liz is always quiet. Sanjari is saying, Liz was the secretary of the Students' Union when Minu was the president.
Yes, yes.
So she's not really quiet. Once she opens up, she's okay. All her dimples smiling away.
Yeah. No, I mean, she's been quiet through these conversations.
Yes.
I remember her vivacious and charming, as everyone says, She's really special.
But it was
how
lovely.
did we cope with our transfers? Shafiqi is asking. Well, I think, the nice thing about State Bank of India, you don't need to change jobs. Every 3 years, it's like taking up a new job. The variety of activities that the bank is into, whatever you want. And I found as the years pass, some of the assignments like this McKinsey reorganization, the working in Staff College, Hyderabad, these are all really wonderful assignments where you meet people across the country. So handling them, I guess, is part of the thing, that you accept and you take it on. But we managed, we coped. A lot of women fell by the side because they had to compromise, but the staying power of women is increasing. More and more women are staying the course and staying to the end. And we had Arundhati Bhattacharya, who has a special needs child, her only child has special needs, and she's managed, to reach the top with all that. So women, as they are coming in, are becoming, more resilient. Perhaps today there are more support systems than during our time, for kids and leaving kids with anyone. It's difficult, but it's always been a compromise somewhere. You can't have it like Indira Nui says, you can't have it all. It's something somewhere you have to give it.
No, I am very grateful to the bank because my husband was in the Air Force and they really adjusted me and sent me around as much as possible, of course. I mean, it took a little while maybe, but I went with him because he was a pakka panju that way. You will, if you don't come with me, you quit. That's it. So I had to do that. I mean, he was, the bank was very, very accommodating and did let me go around because they had a special consideration for armed forces. They knew perfectly well it was transferable. So I went on and I am ever so grateful for the bank. I'm ever so grateful.
Sandhya, you want to close and we can carry on after that. Yeah, thank you so much. This has been brilliant.
Yeah, I'm going to officially close the session, but we'll stay on. Yeah.